right, guys, this is Crazy Kev here, and I'm here with Joe Cavallaro. Joe, how are we doing?
Great. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Joe. Can't complain. And Joe, man, talk us a little bit more about Combat FC and what you kind of do for them.
So I'm the owner, I guess, is the best way to put it. I told you a little bit earlier. We had another brand before this called World Championship Fighting, and we did that for a bunch of years. And just through life circumstances, my matchmaker adopted a little boy, and we kind of stopped doing those fights. And we came back after a 10-year layoff, and came back with this new brand called Combat FC. And it's just, we're 8 fights into it. It's grown, exponentially. It's way beyond what I thought it would be. At this point, we kind of really, been able to capture the Boston market, right? We get all the fighters that we want. We get, it's worked well. It's worked very well.
Yeah, no, that's definitely incredible. And we mentioned you used to have another promotion, having like Calvin Cater and Jon Jones in that promotion. I mean, when you had those guys fighting for you, did you ever think they were going to reach the level that they're at today?
Yeah, so definitely. Cal started with us when he was a kid. I mean, he was young and he was walking through guys, and you could just see he was a solid fighter. He was so young when I forget how old he was, but he's been doing this for like 17, 18 years, and he's obviously a really, really high level guy, but super good guy to deal with. He's got a great show. He does up in New Hampshire. We just went a couple of weeks ago. It was awesome. He's got a really good setup. It was fun. We had a real good time. We got to hang out and talk to him for a little bit. But I'll tell you a funny story. Jon Jones was he trained at a team called Bomb Squad. And they were out of Cortland, New York, which is about 6 or 8 hours away from Boston. That's where we are. Combat FC is based in Boston. So we brought him in. His coach called us, and one of the things about his coach, we this is what would happen. We would have fights. We would have all these fights made. And one of the things is if we make a commitment to a fighter and we say, hey, we're going to give you a fight on this date, and your fight backs out 2 weeks before, a lot of times promoters will just not fill that fight for you. But you've already trained for 6 weeks. You've taken it real serious. And it's difficult at that point to bring somebody in, because usually you have to fly somebody in and you have to pay them a fortune. And it's not necessarily the fight that you wanted. And it's not a very cost-effective way to do business, and it winds up costing the promoter money to bring somebody in. But so Ryan was a guy that we used to bring guys in all the time because we could call him at any time. He had a really good team. I think he still does. I haven't spoken to him in a while. He's got his own promotion out in New York, and he's doing real well. But we would call him up last minute, and we'd say, hey, I need a 135. He's got to be able to fight a guy that's 5-0 and blah, 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 blah. And, Ryan would say, yeah, no problem. We'll send you a guy. And he would send us a guy that was a killer, that was always all his guys were always in shape and they could always fight. So Ryan called us and said, hey, we got this guy. He's 1-0. He just had his first fight last weekend, and he's the future of their sport. He's going to be the greatest fighter that's ever lived. And I was like, yeah, I've heard that before. And he came out and we had him fight Parker Porter, through a series of fights backing out. John had taken a fight every weekend, right? He was 1-0 when we got him, when we signed the contract with him. And then he was 4-0 by the time he fought for us, which was like 5 weeks later. I mean, he fought like every weekend or 6 weeks later or something stupid. So every opponent that we had for him kept, people were reading about it and they were like, I'm not fighting this guy. Give us somebody else. So the only guy that we could get to step up was an undefeated light heavyweight named Parker Porter. And I'm sure Parker fights in the UFC now as a heavyweight, right? So I think Parker was 2-0 and Jon was 4-0. But, now we're back to the situation, right? I got a guy coming out of Cortland, New York, that sells 0 tickets, right? And this is it's a business. We run this like a business, and he sells 0 tickets, and then he's got to fight it. We got to pay another guy big money to come up from Connecticut because now he's fighting a 4-0 monster that's it's all first round stoppages. So Parker said, screw it, I'll come up, and we had to pay him a good amount, and it's a fight that didn't make sense on paper for business wise, but it was a great, it was a great matchup. And, looking back on it, they're both heavyweights in the UFC now, but it was funny because Ryan called us up and he said, John has won his last 3 fights. We want to renegotiate our contract. And I said, yeah, And they said, yeah. And I said to my matchmaker, I said, ask him if we could have renegotiated if he had lost his last 3 fights. And so we left it the way it was. And Jon came in and had a tremendous performance. And I have the video right here of that fight.
Wow.
That nobody's ever seen it. It's right here. It's WCF 3 6/20/08, Parker Porter and Jon Jones. I have the DVD of it. I've been looking for they had these mini DVs, was the tapes that they will put out on, and I have no idea where they are, but I just found this last week. And, Jon talking about retiring, I think we're going to release it. We're going to watermark it and, put our logos, the Combat FC logo all over it and the website and all that stuff, and then release it. And I'm sure 1 million people will steal it, but it'll go viral. It's only a short fight, but, it's with the walkouts and all that stuff, it is a little bit more. It's just, it was filmed, as inexpensively as we could back then. It's nothing like what we do right now, right? So the production that we have right now, we spend about $150,000 on production. So, we have lights and production trucks and, digital walls and all these crazy things that we spend money on. But back in the day, that's not what World Championship Fighting was about. We were, I think when we started, we were getting $30 a seat. There was not a lot of money in it, so we had to do everything down and dirty. Now our cheapest ticket is $70. Our most expensive is $250. So it's a great price point, for the value, right? We'll do 15 fights that night. You start at 6:30 and it goes to 11:30, and it'll be on demand on UFC Fight Pass, and it'll be live at 8:00 on Swerve. So I don't know. We talked about this a little bit off camera. Swerve is a digital network that it's what they call FAST TV. It stands for Free Advertised Supported TV. So if you think of companies like Roku and Amazon and Apple and Fubo and TiVo and Sling and all these channels that are free with with commercials in them, that you can pick up, streaming without paying for them. But they have commercials in them. So we go 8:00 on Swerve, which is a unbelievable channel. I watch it all the time. It's combat sports 24 hours a day, and it's for free. So if you go on any of these free platforms, Pluto, Amazon, Roku, Apple, any of these ones, and you search for Swerve, they have an incredible library of fights. They have all of our fights up there. Excuse me. And they run them 24 hours a day. So we go live at 8:00. We'll show a couple of amateur fights. We have 3 amateur titles, and then we have 2 pro titles. But I think you'll wind up getting, I think the main pro card is like 6 fights, and then the amateur card that will show the title fights probably 3. So there'll be 11 fights or so that night that you can watch. So it's a great platform, and that goes to 80 million houses. So all U.S., all of Canada, right? And I think we talk about this a little bit off camera. One of the things we do is we work with companies that are trying to advertise, right? Anybody that wants to get in front of 18 to 59-year-old men, this is the way to do it, right? You associate with something that's really cool, which is MMA and Combat FC, the brand, and then we put you in front of, and we do some things with product integration. And back in the day, we used to do, I'll give you a perfect example. We would get, like, Harley Davidson would come in and they would put the motorcycles in the lobby, right? So then they would have a table, and they would have all Harley shirts, and they'd have a couple of pretty girls behind the counter selling the shirts. And then we'd have a couple of salesmen sitting with the brand new bikes, whatever the best bikes were that year. And then we would do, obviously signage in the octagon, in the cage. And then we would do giveaways with their customers. And then we would do radio commercials, and it would be tagged the Harley Davidson dealership or Harley Davidson New England would be tagged in those radio commercials, presents Combat FC. And then if we do email blasts with them, we do all these different things. One time we did a ring card girl contest at the venue, so there's ways that we can integrate all this. We have TV commercials, right? So we have a show that's on what they call NESN, which is New England Sports Network. That's where the Red Sox and the Bruins play. And that's 4.2 million houses in New England where the Red Sox and the Bruins play. I mean, it doesn't get any bigger than that in New England sports. And we have TV commercials built into that for a show that we call Combat FC Rewind, and it's basically a look back. It's like a lot of the other shows that you'd see. It's a look back at fights that have already happened, talking about fights that are up and coming. So we used Jan. I know you had an interview with Jan Oliveira, who's a guy that fights for us. Super nice guy, really rugged, real tough Brazilian, and he's just good. He's a good, well-rounded 6-0, and he's fighting a guy that's 10-3, and it's this is it. These guys have the opportunity to fight to see whether they have the ability to go to the next level, right? Whether they get to the UFC, and this is a fight that has a lot of this title. Jan holds our 170 title, and he's moving up to 185. So it holds a lot of weight if he has two belts in a Fight Pass show. That'll help launch his career and hopefully, get one of the two of them into the UFC. It's not a given that Jan's going to win. I mean, he's got to get through this guy and Chris Foster, and it's a real tough guy, been around forever. Get a really good record. They should have fought years ago when they were lighter. It's funny, they're both grown men now, and I think Jan probably talked to you about he took that time off in between to raise his family and grow his business and all that stuff. But they're both I think they want to say they fought at like 145 back in the day, and now they're fighting at 185. But it's funny. I was 147, and I'm 59 years old, and I'm like 220 now. I can't get any lighter. But I walked around at 147 for years and years and years. It was crazy. And you just get older, and you get bigger. You get Jan's still young enough, and Chris is still young enough that it's going to be a really, really good fight. They're in their 30s, and it should be fun.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's going to be an awesome fight. And kind of like you mentioned, I definitely think the winner could potentially get that call to the UFC. I definitely think it's going to be an exciting matchup, man. And you mentioned a little bit too that obviously, you've known Dana White for a pretty long time. I mean, what's maybe some of your favorite memories with Dana White that you might have?
I don't know if Dana wanted me to share them all. Dana's a, he is exactly the way he comes off on TV, right? There's no bullshit about Dana. That's the way he is. That's the way he acts. That's the way his attitude is about everything. And he's literally one of my best buddies. We have nothing but fun together. But we've done so many cool things, I mean, stuff before we've been friends way before the UFC. I was 22 and he was 18. I don't think he got involved in the UFC until he was in his 30s. So, I used to fly out to Vegas and we go to all the big fights together. We used to love boxing and we go to all the big boxing matches. And I still love boxing, and I know Dana does too. I don't keep up with it as much as I used to, but we went to everything. We went to all the biggest fights. I went to Tyson Holyfield the first time they fought. It was actually the night after Dana got married. And we were talking about it the other day. He was in Boston the other night. We had dinner, and we were talking about how he was on the plane flying the red eye to Hawaii with his wife. And I don't know if it was the red eye, but whatever. He was flying to Hawaii on the plane, and the captain came on, and everybody was sleeping. And the captain came on and says, "For anybody that cares, Evander Holyfield just knocked out Mike Tyson." And Dana said he was freaking out. He was the only one awake on the plane, and he was going crazy. But I mean, back in the day, we went bungee jumping together. That's a fond memory. As funny as a bastard. Dana's got like 100 acres up in Maine, and we go up there. He's got every motorcycle you can name. Like when I tell you he's got every motorcycle you can name, he's got, a garage filled with motorcycles. It's the length of maybe a football field, or maybe even longer than a football field. And it's 3 rows, all dirt bikes on one side, all street bikes on the other side, custom bikes, Jesse James custom bikes, custom, Ducatis, and it's just every motorcycle you name. And we love that shit. We love that stuff. It's a passion we both have. And then, he's got every gun you can name. We go up shooting, and he's got this my favorite gun. He's got this 50 cal sniper rifle. We're laying in a field in the middle of Maine, 4 hours up, and they're like, "You see the other side of that field?" And I'm like, "No, I can't see it." And they're like, "Well, lay down and look through this thing," and I look through the 50 cal rifle. It's a Barrett sniper rifle, and you look down, you look through the scope, and it's like it's right in front of you. And they fill it with what they call, I think the word is tannerite or something like that. It's an explosive, and they'll fill like Halloween decorations like pumpkins and shit, and they put this stuff inside of it. When you shoot it, it blows up. It's what they call a percussion bomb, so it collapses on itself and then it blows up afterwards. So you hear the gun go off, and then a split second later you hear this boom, and the whole place just blows up. You see stuff flying in the air. It's, I love stuff like that. And we're like kids, He's got a go-kart track, and he's got, the only thing that he doesn't do that I wish he did was snowmobile. I love snowmobiling, but he doesn't like the winter. So he, we spend time. We go to Cabo together. That's always an incredible trip. We have fun. We have a lot of fun together, and he's just a super generous guy and treats all his friends really, really. He treats everybody really well, but he just, he's super generous to us. He brings us places that I typically wouldn't be able to go, and do things that we wouldn't be able to do. And obviously the fights are incredible, going to the fights and hanging out with him, and, meeting all the fighters, which has been, I'm buddies with so many fighters that are guys that I watched and just loved, and then I get the opportunity to be buddies with them, like guys like Liddell's a good friend of mine. And it's just, it's been a blessing. That stuff is really, really fun. I think as you get in the community a little bit more, you'll start meeting guys and you're like, oh, this, we back in the day when the UFC started, when Dana started with it, there was 4 fights a year. There was, maybe 80 guys under contract. We knew everybody. Like I knew everybody's coaches. I knew their camps. I knew their, they were just these small communities, and it was awesome back then. But it's awesome now. But it's like some of the times I'll be watching the fights, and I watch every fight. I watch every UFC fight. I watch the prelims. I watch all the way through. And it's just my thing. I don't watch any other sports. I love the fights, right? So I watch everything. And then every once in a while, I'll see a guy and they'll be like, yeah, this guy's on a 6-fight winning streak in the UFC. And I'm like, I never heard of him, right? There's just so many guys that like, I don't even know how this guy could get by me. I watch everything. And they say he's on, he's been fighting in the UFC. He's got 6 fights. And I'm like, I've never even seen him before. I don't even know who he is. But it's such a contrast from back in the day where all the guys in the press knew each other. You know what I mean? All the guys that were in media, we all, we'd go to the show. Dana would be at the shows. Dana, we'd be out. We'd all be able to interact because it wasn't as big as it is now, where Dana, when he walks through, he gets mobbed, right? He can't go out and hang out at the bar and the lounge before the fight, the night before, which was a everyday thing. Everybody knew him. Everybody had access to him. But it's so overwhelming for him now, just he's got to stay at a different hotel. And he doesn't do that because he doesn't want to be part of it. It's just he would never get anything done. I mean, he'd be signing autographs for, 24 hours a day. And he's so gracious about that stuff. I don't know, I'm not popular by any means to anybody, so it's no problem for me. But, I watch him do it, and I'm like, damn, man, I don't think I could do that. It's good that nobody wants my autograph or that stuff, my picture or anything. But he takes the time and he meets with everybody, and he makes everybody feel good about what they're doing. And, he's just a cool guy. I say all the time, he's exactly the way he is on TV. That's him. It's no bullshit. He's not trying to be somebody else, which is awesome,
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's incredible. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I love the UFC so much. And just comparing that to like other sports as well, too. Like you mentioned, like these other, like maybe like the NFL promoter, like you don't hear them talk the way that Dana White does. I just think the sport's so authentic. And I really enjoy that. And I really appreciate that. And I feel like whenever Dana White eventually steps down, it's going to really change up the game of like UFC. And I hope whoever takes over is going to kind of be the same way. Cause I really, really like that authenticity when it comes to the UFC.
I can't picture anybody doing it, right? I mean, who would do it? There's only, one guy like Dana in that type of position. In Boston, there's a lot of people like Dana. We're all, I think we're raised a little bit different than a lot of places. Everybody's, or at least all of my friends in our community, me and Dana, the guys that we hang out with are all like-minded, right? We all kind of got brought up a little bit different, and we think different. We think rationally, I guess, probably the best word. You know what I mean? And there's not a lot of people that think like that anymore. Some of the stuff they're coming up with, I'm like, this just does not make any sense. I don't understand what these people are talking about. And Dana does a real good job of cutting through a lot of that bullshit, and because he's in a position where he has to make decisions, about COVID, about, transgender fighting in sports and different things like that. He's had to take opinions on a lot of stuff that's been dicey, and he's always just been himself about it, and he's always come out on the right side of it. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate it as well too, and I definitely think a lot of the fans do, and that's why we love this sport so much. And another thing about you as well too is you used to be a manager for a couple guys on the Ultimate Fighter, and just people in general. I mean, talk us a bit more about kind of how you got into that and how you enjoyed it.
Yeah, so it was great. I had a job, a full-time job. I sold technology for a company called Sun Microsystems, which was one of the biggest technology companies in the world at the time. And I had the ability as a salesman. Nobody cares what you do, right? I don't have to. If I can work my job, if I can make my number, they give me a quota at the beginning of the year. And if I make that working an hour a week, nobody cares. They don't want me to go to they just want the number, right? So I had the ability to do a lot of stuff in my free time. And Dana said to me one day, he said, my best buddy was the middleweight champ of the world. He's a guy named Dana Rosenblatt. And I got to train with him and kind of go up through his career. I think he retired at like 37-1. He was a southpaw out of Boston, boxer, middleweight. And so I had the experience of going through all that and being part of his team and part of his camp and everything. And when Dana White bought the UFC, he said, you should get involved in this. You should start managing some of these guys. At least I know you know the business and we trust each other. And, let's do it. So I started managing guys. I've had a ton of guys over the years that have done really, really well. And that has been a blessing in itself. I used to do the cuts before they had cut men. I would do the cuts. I'm not a fighter by any means. I trained my whole life, but I'm not a professional fighter or anything. But I would work the corners, and if you were doing something very stupid, it had to be pretty painfully obvious for me to be able to call it out. But if you're doing something really stupid, I would be able to say that. But the one thing that I did really well was stop the cuts. So I was always involved in that, and that stuff's just so much fun. It's like being a part of it. I'll give you one quick example. So Marcus Davis, they called him the Irish hand grenade. Marcus became number 6 in the world. He's a guy that used to train with me and Dana Rosenblatt back in the day, out of World Gym in Somerville. And so Marcus goes to the UFC, and we bring him over to what do they call it? Belfast, Northern Ireland. And Dana calls me, and we called him the Irish hand grenade. So Dana says, look, you got to change his name. We're going to call him. I said, okay, we'll call him the Celtic Warrior. There was a guy named Stevie Collins. They referred to him as the Celtic Warrior. And we go to the arena, and Marcus is fighting an English guy, right? Those Belfast are not particularly fond of English guys. And so we go to the arena. It's about 8,000 seats, and we're standing in the alcove, the entrance where you walk out where the curtain is, and we're behind the curtain. It's me, Marcus, and we grabbed some other guy that was out there. I just wanted another coach. This guy helped us out, and the community's real good like that. Everybody will stick together. So we had an extra corner, and we're standing there getting ready to walk out. And I've never seen the movie, but I guess in the Boondock Saints, there's a prayer that this guy says. He's like an old Irish guy, and he in a brogue, the Irish accent. He whispers a prayer, and it's something to the effect of, God, give me the strength to strike down my enemies where they stand. And he goes through this long prayer. So the opponent comes out to the arena. All the lights are going and everything, and he comes out dancing, and he gets in the cage. And then they turn down all the lights when Marcus comes out. We're in the alcove, and the place is silent. And you hear the whisper of that Irish guy, the prayer, and he says, God, give me the strength to strike down my enemies where they stand. And the guy's counting down, they in the back, they're counting down till the minute they can open the curtain, the second they're going to open the curtain. They're like 3, 2, 1. The curtain pops open, and it goes into Jump Around House of Pain. And the lights go on, and the entire arena starts bouncing. I had goosebumps on me. I've never been part of anything like that in my life. I can only imagine what Marcus felt, because he had to go out and fight this guy. But it was like the craziest experience. It was like almost out of body. I was like, the entire arena was bouncing up and down. Everybody was freaking out because of Marcus, and it was just crazy. And then he went in and knocked the kid out dead cold. We got a $50,000 bonus. I mean, it was one of the greatest trips ever. So I've been blessed to be a part of that kind of stuff. It's just been such a cool ride. You know what I mean? It's my thing. Like I've always been a fight guy. I always loved it. And then to be able to be a part of it with Dana and be a part of it with, I had Kenny Florian and Marcus and Patrick Cote. Patrick Cote is one of the best Canadian fighters ever. I mean, it's him and George St. Pierre, right? And, I had Sam Hoger and Alex Karalexis and Drew Fickett and Kevin Jordan, who's a heavyweight, fought in the UFC. Trying to think of who, I had a bunch of guys that were really, really good. And then I had a bunch of guys that didn't go far, but we still had nothing but great memories. I saw one of the guys, actually, I saw a guy yesterday at the dog park that I used to corner. He retired at 10-2. It was just some guy. He came to the fights one night and he didn't have a corner. And I said, who's bringing, what are you doing? Who's wrapping your hands? And he goes, I didn't think that through, I didn't think it through that much. This is how new the sport was at the time. And I said, well, come on, we'll corner you. We'll grab a couple of the guys, and we walked them out. Marcus wrapped his hands. We went out and he submitted the guy instantly. He was a jiu-jitsu guy. He submitted the guy instantly. So I hadn't seen him in years. He's in his 50s, and I'm looking at him and I'm like, you know me? And he says, you look familiar. And I said, didn't I used to corner you fighting? And he goes, yeah, you did. So it was, it's crazy, and, I could just tell you stories forever about all the craziness and all the, backstage stuff. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a really, really cool ride.
Yeah, like I said, that's awesome. Yeah, well, when you mentioned that backstage stuff, I mean, what is maybe some maybe behind the scenes stuff that maybe fight fans might not know about that kind of goes on?
Well, nowadays it's completely different, right? So back in the day, nobody, we were making this up as we went. Like Dana, put structure around this thing, right? I mean, I remember the first time I ever cornered anybody in MMA was years and years ago, and there was a motorcycle gang that ran a fight. It was just no rules, whatever. My buddy called me up, and he's a guy that I had kickboxed with, and he said to me, my buddy Einstein, and he said to me, hey, will you come down and corner me? And I said, what are you doing? You boxing? And he said, no. I said, oh, you kickboxing? And he said, no. And I said, what are you doing? And he goes, just show up, dude. I show up down there. There's just fights in this thing with no rules. And it was funny. That night, George Rivera, remember George Rivera?
Yeah.
So George fought Tim Sylvia, and George choked him out. So, I mean, this was years ago, way before, we were all kids, it was just crazy. And, how'd you like to see George Rivera, 185 pounder, fight, a 265 pound, what's his name, Tim Sylvia? It was crazy, just, and there's been, I mean, I'll give you the best one ever. This is my best, story ever was Kimbo Slice and Gannon. So I managed Sean Gannon, and that fight was life-changing. Like to this day, I've never seen anything like it. I've never, the noise it made when those two guys hit each other without a thing. I mean, it was the noise that it made when a 265 pound man hit a 285 pound man with no gloves made my stomach turn. I mean, it was horrific. I remember when Kimbo walked in, we did it at a gym called Matt Santos had it. It was in Providence, Rhode Island. And the reason why we did it in Rhode Island is we were all licensed in Massachusetts, right? Sean was a Boston police officer. I was a licensed manager. Sean was a licensed fighter. This is right when cell phones came out. We went in and like everybody had to turn in their cell phone, and then there was footage. They had cameras and we had cameras, and we were like, who takes the film? And we're like, okay, whoever wins takes it. So I actually have that footage at my house right now. I have the mini DV tapes of it from that fight, with stuff that nobody's ever seen. And but long story short, we're in the venue, and Gannon's in the back, and he's sick as a dog. He's got like 103 fever. I don't know why, he just had some type of flu or something. He just like, I'm fighting, I don't care what happens. And Kimbo walked out, and I have a great picture of it someplace. It's a picture of me standing in the background. I actually have a beer in my hand. He's drinking beers, watching it, and I'm just standing there, and I'm watching. Kimbo's in a gray pair of sweatpants, and he's walking back and forth, no shirt on. And I'm looking at him, and we're in a room full of fighters, all guys that a lot of cops, a lot of guns, a lot of, $10,000 bet. It's a $10,000 cash bet. They brought 10 grand. We brought 10 grand. Unheard of, like bare knuckle fight in a warehouse in Rhode Island. And I'm watching Kimbo walk back and forth, and I'm looking at him. It's the first time I've ever seen him live in person. And I'm thinking to myself, if this guy wants to, he's going to kill all of us. I mean, there's going to be nothing we can do. He was just so intimidating, and then they absolutely killed each other. And if you watch the video, I don't know if people go back and watch it, Kimbo Gannon on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah.
You can go on there and watch it. You can go on there and watch it anytime. And it was just crazy. So if you watch the fight, Gannon had him rocked. So Gannon was a southpaw judo guy with really good jiu-jitsu, and he had a southpaw, and he had won the Golden Gloves, and he could box. So he was piecing him up, and then the rule was no takedowns. They said there was no rules, and I kept saying, your idea of no rules and our idea of no rules are two different things, right? I mean, they're like, no rules, no rules. What they meant is they wanted no, what they call Broughton rules, which is boxing, right? It's stand up, bare knuckle boxing. But what happened is Gannon rocked him, and Kimbo shot in for a double leg takedown. And then Gannon hit him with the standing guillotine and started choking him. And then all the corners started getting in there, screaming at each other. Like I said, there's cops down there. Everybody's got guns. There's all pro fighters. A couple of guys were having a few beers. It was a volatile situation, and they were all trying to pull each other away, and the place is about to explode. It was out of the movies. Life-changing experience. I'll never look at fighting. I've never seen anything like it since. I've never, it was amazing. It was just an amazing experience. And then Gannon won, and became the superhero legend, and went on and fought in the UFC, and it was just incredible. It was an incredible thing. If you haven't seen it yet, go on YouTube and look for Sean Gannon Kimbo Slice and watch the video on that. And it's a 14-minute. I shouldn't have given it away, but I told you what happened. But it's a 14-minute fight, just a knockdown, drag him, slobberknockle. That's the best word. Rogan uses that word, slobberknockle. It was just amazing.
Oh, so the fight with Sean Gannon. I said, yeah, I've seen that one before. I think that's like Kimbo Slice's only loss when it comes to street fighting, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Kimbo was a super, super good dude. He came up. One of the things that I used to do back in the day is I used to bring celebrities in to do appearances at the fights. So, we had like Rampage and, Ninja Hua. Obviously all the guys that I worked with came, like Kenny and Marcus and Patrick and, all those guys, Gannon. And in 2008, I brought Dana out to do an appearance for us. And we sold 4,000 tickets that night. We completely packed the venue. And that was 2008. I mean, it was crazy because the only people that knew him were people that were in MMA, and we still packed the place. But I brought Kimbo out, and he was awesome. He was just such a good dude, I called him up. He was doing the Ultimate Fighter show, and it turned out the third episode of the Ultimate Fighter show was the week that we were doing our show. So it was on Tuesday night, and Friday night was our show, and Kimbo fought in that third week. So we could advertise the fact that he was going to be there, and then he was there on Friday, and because the show is taped. So I called him up and I said, listen, I'd love to have you come out. I'll fly you up first class. And I said, I'll give you $5,000 in cash. So, give it to you in $100 bills. You don't have to take a check or anything. So he says, yeah, that's awesome. So he came up and we did the thing, and I started talking to him, and he was really popular at the time. And I said to his guys, I said, geez, I'd love to start, maybe booking some of these appearances for you. And he said, what do you take? And I said, I take 25% of whatever I get. And he's like, what are you going to take 25% of $5,000? He goes, that doesn't make any sense. It's not worth me going for the weekend. And I said, no, I'll get you 25,000 an appearance. He goes, 25,000 appearance. He goes, you just gave me 5. I said, yeah, but we're friends. He goes, we're not that good of friends. So it was pretty funny. So I actually booked him out. I got him 2 appearances. I got him one in Atlantic City and one in the next night. The fight was Friday. And then he went to the fight live. And then the next night was the UFC, and he was going to go to a bar in New York City. I booked him 2 appearances. One was on a Friday night down in Atlantic City, and the next one was in New York City to actually go watch the UFC fights at a bar. And I got him $45,000 for it. And he called me like 3 weeks before, and he said, I just got an opportunity to fight Houston Alexander. And he goes, I don't want to take the time off of training. He goes, even though I like the idea of getting the money, he goes, I don't want to take the time off of training. He goes, I want to stop doing the appearances till after this fight. And you got to appreciate that. He took it serious. That's one thing about Kimbo. He was a good, solid fighter. He wasn't going to be I think what they did wrong with him is they told everybody that he was going to beat Chuck Liddell, and he was never going to beat Chuck Liddell. It wasn't going to happen. But I think I don't know if you remember Butterbean.
Oh yeah, of course.
We actually brought Butterbean out to the fights too. He was another guy that we brought out. I didn't know, but so Butterbean, they did a really good job with him because he was a very, very exciting fighter. He's a tremendous, super, super nice guy. I met him a couple of times, and super nice guy. But they didn't say that Butterbean was going to beat Mike Tyson. They said he was the king of the 4-rounders, and that's what they marketed him as. And I think had they done that with Kimbo and just said, hey, this is the biggest, strongest, toughest guy that we've seen, scariest guy we've seen since Mike Tyson. Let's see what he does. I think his career would have lasted longer, and I think it would have, been a benefit to him and to everybody else, right? But by coming out and telling everybody that he was going to beat Chuck Liddell, like it just took a little bit of the. I would have marketed it a different way. I guess that's the best way to say it. But he did great. I mean, he had some really good wins and some really fun fights, and he made a lot of money, and he was a really super, super nice guy. He was just a respectful guy to me, very much a gentleman. His manager's a guy named Mike Imba, super, super nice guy, always kept his word, always did what they said they were going to do. They were just good guys, I was sorry to see him go. Sean passed away also, right? Which is crazy. Sean was a good friend. We had a lot of fun together. He was a incredibly intelligent person, and he didn't look like it from his build, because he was such a big, burly guy. He was just an incredibly smart guy, and had a lot of intelligent conversations with him. He was different. He was a lot different than what you would expect from him, and but he was a good dude. He was a really good dude.
Oh, that's incredible. That's definitely some pretty cool stories with Kimbo and Sean, 100%. And obviously, with you being in MMA for such a long time, I mean, how do you like how MMA is kind of evolved? I mean, talk to us a little bit more about that.
It's incredible. We don't do a lot of amateur fights, and we did a couple the last event, and it's funny. We have 3 amateur title fights on Swerve. So we're gonna do. I think I started telling you about Swerve. We're gonna go live on Swerve at 8 p.m. So you can tune into that on any of the stations, right? So Roku, Fubo, Amazon, Apple, all those stations. Check it out, Swerve TV. And like I said, that's a 24-hour network that shows live fights, constantly. It's a great. I watch it all the time. I have it on in the background while I'm cooking. I mean, when I'm eating dinner or whatever, I'm always watching fights, and they do a really good job. But we're actually going to do 3 amateur titles, and then we're going to do 5 or 6, I think 6 pro fights right now. And sometimes you lose them the week of, we're getting close here. But usually, if you can make it past the first bunch, 8 weeks of fight or 6 weeks of training, and then you get to the last 2 weeks, we lose in between 3 and 2 weeks. We lose a lot of fighters because guys didn't do their medicals. Guys are out on weight. Guys are, there's just a million excuses. But usually if you make it past 2 weeks and you get into where we are now, and I don't know how many days out we are, like 8 days or whatever it is, so 10 days, usually the fights stay. Unless you lose somebody at weigh-in, everybody's 100% committed. Their contracts are in now, their medicals are in, so you don't really lose a lot. So we're hoping to have 6 fights on Swerve that are pro fights and 3 amateur title fights. But those guys that are amateurs that fight for us are guys that we see something in that they can get to the next level. So Rick Caldwell's my matchmaker. He's the best matchmaker there is. He's incredible. And I'm watching these amateur fights that he put on the last time, and these kids are so skilled. It's incredible. Like, I wonder, I think about this a lot. Like, what would happen if we put some of the guys that were champions back then with some of these guys now? They're just so well-rounded. I mean, it's a different breed, man. These young kids, we had 2 kids that fought for us last time, and I stand on stage when they weigh in, and I stand behind everybody and, off to the side, excuse me. And I'm looking at them and they look like they're 12 years old. I'm like, these kids aren't going to be able to fight. And then they go in and absolutely kill each other with the highest level MMA. I'm like, where did these kids learn in this short time? But they train MMA. They're not boxers that are coming over. They're not wrestlers that are coming over. They're not jiu-jitsu guys that are making the transition. They're MMA fighters. They're well-rounded. And so I think that's one of the biggest changes, right? Is you see guys like, over the years, it was Hoist Gracie, right, that started it, and nobody knew jiu-jitsu, and everybody figured it out, and then everybody started beating jiu-jitsu guys, and then it became wrestlers, and then the guys that could defend against getting taken down and keep the fight standing, like Chuck Liddell, they dominated. And then now we see this, these Dagestanian guys that have this style that I don't particularly appreciate. It's not my thing. It's very, very dominant. That grabbing guys, dragging them to the ground, interlocking their legs and holding them down and just hitting them with punches. Not really devastating punches, but just, pitter-patter punches. I don't like that style, but somebody's going to figure out how to beat that. And once one guy does, everybody does. And that's the way it's been with mixed martial arts since I got involved 30 years ago, right? It's just, they get guys that are dominant that nobody thinks that can be beat, and then somebody figures it out, and then everybody knows it. Once they know it, they know it. And it's already started, like those Dagestanian guys and, all those guys from that part of the world, they're really tough to market, right? Because nobody can pronounce their name. They all have the same beard with no mustache. Their names are very, very similar, and none of them speak English, right? And they have in my professional opinion, a boring style, right? It's not something that I enjoy. It's a very effective style. I'm not saying it isn't, it's a very, very effective style, but it's not fan friendly, right? So they're difficult guys to market, right? They're very, very difficult guys to market. And it's just interesting to see. And I'm waiting to see who breaks that, that style. And then the floodgates will open and we'll see another iteration of this thing, once people get that and can do what they do, it'll make it even more interesting, and that's the way it's been for 30 years. You just keep seeing the evolution of MMA, and it's been incredible.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I definitely think it's going to be interesting to see who's eventually going to be that guy that's going to take down like Islam and those kind of guys like you mentioned. I mean, it's definitely insane.
There's a handful of guys that I love watching. I mean, not saying all of them, because some of them have some really good styles. What's the guy's name? The redhead guy with
Shara Bullet, right?
Yeah. He's fun. I can get behind him. He's fun. He's got a good way about him. And, that style of fighting I enjoy. It's different, right? He's definitely different. Do I think he's going to be a world champ? I don't see it, but, So I saw Conor McGregor. I didn't think anything of Conor McGregor for years, until he beat Dustin Poirier. I didn't think he could fight. And then when I saw Dustin Poirier and I thought there's a guy that's going to make it somewhere. And then when Conor beat him, I was like, okay, this kid can fight. He's, I was completely wrong about this because, there's a lot of times I'm wrong about stuff, I just, you get caught up in your own opinion and you get, it's funny because there's a young guy, his name is Colton Only. You can look him up on Instagram, Colton Only. And Colton's an 11-year-old kid. And I don't know how I got following him on Instagram, but I don't know, one of the guys that runs the Instagram page followed, because I go on there and look, and it's a Combat FC page. All of our social media is all at combatfc.tv. So you can catch us on any platform. Our actual website is combatfc.tv. So we kind of kept it standard. But so I'm looking at the combatfc.tv Instagram page, and I see this young kid. He's a cute little kid, and he's like, 10, 11 years old at the time. And we started following him, and he breaks down the fights, and he's like, he knows the fight's cold. I mean, kid's a genius when it comes to fights. And I thought he was reading something. That's how good he is. I thought his father wrote it down for him and that's what he was doing. But he's just a really smart kid. He's a jiu-jitsu guy. I've come to meet him and become friends with him and his family. They're actually coming up to the next event. So, but I would go on there and argue with him about, what he thought about this and what he thought about that. And I have never been that type of sports fan. Like, I don't really watch any other sports, but I love seeing people's insight on stuff like that, and he's awesome. But check him out. He's coming to the fight, and I reached out to him on social media and I said, hey, do me a favor. I said, is your mother or your father on here? And he said, yeah, my mother's on. And I said, copy her on a message with us. And she came on and I said, listen, I want him to break down. I said, you guys have Fight Pass? She said, yes. And I said, I want you to break down the top 3 fights of the night, and then I'll give you $50 to do it, right? So it was his first paid gig, right? 11 years old. He's got his first paid gig. He watches it on the thing and he put it up the next day, and it's awesome. And I actually send his videos to Dana. I'm hoping Dana's going to get behind him, but he hasn't yet. He sees them. He sees all the videos. And I had dinner with him Sunday, and he was in Boston. His son's looking at schools, or he's looking at apartments. He's going to, looking to see what he's going to do. He just graduated from University of San Diego, I believe. But we were talking about the kid. I showed him the video, and I'm like, this kid's badass. I mean, he breaks down the fights. He breaks down all the UFCs. He does a really super good job. So I'll introduce you to him at the fights. If you come to the fights, I'll introduce you to him. You guys that could be your first guy, your first big connection to the UFC. I'm telling you, we're all going to be working for him one day. He's a really smart kid. So.
That's incredible. No, I definitely am curious to check this guy out now after you said that. That's awesome. Good for him as well too. And you mentioned a little bit too with some of these guys, like when they fall out of fights. I mean, when I started doing these interviews, I didn't realize how many fighters they kind of pull out last second. I mean, have you ever had like any crazy excuses you had to deal with as with these fighters?
Yeah, we've been, I don't want to badmouth anybody. I can tell you crazy stories. I had a guy recently, I think I'll hold off on telling the story just out of respect for him. But it's crazy. The stuff that happens is crazy. We got a call. Rico DeShula fights for us. So Rico's a guy that's been around forever. He's a Boston guy. We're super tough kid. He's 11-2, and he's fighting a guy for us named Pampas Gregorio. And Pampas is a guy that trains out of Cerro Longo. I think that's his gym, right? So Matt Serra and Ray Longo, I think they're still a gym, or maybe it's Weidman Longo now. I forget. But so they bring him in he fought in Glory Kickboxing, this guy Pampas. And they bring him in to train with Marab and Aljamain Sterling as a kickboxer guy. And he picks up MMA, and he's a savage, right? So we bring him in. We're going to put him in for our first title. At 135 pounds, we're going to put him in against Rico DeShula. And we're 9 days out from the fight. It's the cornerstone of our card. We've been marketing for weeks. We're, doing the TV show on it. We're really spending a ton of money marketing it. And Rico gets the call 9 days before to go to the Ultimate Fighter show. So he calls me up and he's like, hey, I don't want to put you guys in a bad spot. What do you think I do? I'm like, you have to go. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You have to. He's like, well, I got the kids, this and that. I said, Rico, this is, a once in a lifetime opportunity for you. You have to do this. So he went out and did the Ultimate Fighter show, and he was on McGregor's team. Did you see the season?
Yes, I did. Yep.
Yeah. So, he stole the season. I mean, he was the last guy to get picked. I have no idea why. It made absolutely no sense to pick him last. I mean, the guy's 11-2. He's a savage, right? But he's like, I liken him to Bernard Hopkins. He's not flashy at anything. He's just really good at everything. He's just a really solid fighter. And he goes in. McGregor's team loses 7 in a row, and then he winds up knocking the number one guy out in the 8th fight, the last fight of the season, becomes the star of the entire season. So Pampas comes, we put him in with another guy. Pampas stops this guy in a five-round title fight. He stops the guy in the last round with leg kicks. He gets called to the Contender Series. So Pampas goes out, fights in the Contender Series. He fights the Fury FC, which is another show that's on Fight Pass. He fights their 135-pound champs. So now you got 2 UFC Fight Pass 135-pound champs fighting on the Contender Series. Pampas knocks the guy out. Dana gives him a contract instantly. And then immediately they offer Pampas and Rico the fight in the UFC. So, the point of the story is, this is how it works, right? We're serving as that feeder system, right? We're right in that position where the guys, all the top guys that want to fight, that want to get to the next level, fight for us because they know they have the access on Fight Pass. They also have all that content that goes on Swerve, so they get 80 million houses on Swerve, 180 countries around the world on UFC Fight Pass. It's this huge thing. So they bring him up, and then Rico gets hurt and blows his knee out. And that now, I don't know where he is with fighting, but he's doing commentary for us. We brought him in as a commentator because he's such a good guy, and he knows the fight's cold. He's just a really, really intelligent dude, and he does a real good job. He's gotten, in a very short time, he's gotten up to speed on how to do the commentary. And we put him in with Sean Wheelock, Sean's, in my opinion, the best guy outside the UFC as far as a commentator, and as far as commentators even in the UFC, I think he's one of the best, because you got to understand that those guys are, people don't realize, like, that's the star of your show, right? We have a 2-hour show that we're putting on television, and then we have a 2-hour show we're putting on Swerve also, on Fight Pass and Swerve. Like, there's two big television networks, and that's the star of the show. You have to listen to that guy for 4 hours. If you don't like him, he doesn't do a good job of what he does, you will you'll tune out, and you won't even know why you're leaving. Right? It doesn't register in your head that this commentator is terrible and he's screwing up all the fights and he's talking nonsense, whatever, and you'll tune out. And on the reverse side, if it's a boring fight, those guys can actually talk about it in an interesting way where there's never, even though some fights are boring, there's a lot more going on than what you think, right? So having knowledgeable guys that can say, this is what's happening, this is why he can't get up, this is why he's doing this is, what he's doing wrong. That saves fights that sometimes are boring. We don't get a lot of boring fights. My matchmaker's the best there is, Rick Caldwell, and we don't get a lot of fights like that, but every once in a while you do. And if your commentators aren't good, you get you get a shit product, and people don't realize how important that is. But I want to real quick shout out to Colton. I just looked online here, and I have his Instagram account. It's COLTON OWNLEY. So it's at coltononly.com, at Colton Only on social media there on, what do they call it, Instagram. So hopefully people follow him. You get a kick out of him.
Oh, I'm definitely gonna check him out 100%. And that's a pretty cool story about Rico. I'm glad you brought that up. He's the man that had those double hammer fist knockout. I mean, that was insane.
Yeah. Rico's awesome. He's just such a good dude. He's such a good, and then he's got a son. I don't know how old he is. He's just a kid. He's a little kid, but he's awesome. He trains. I watch videos of him working out and all this stuff. It's, the sport is so much fun. Like, martial arts in general have been a blessing in my life. I started in martial arts when I was a little kid. I was a hyper kid, and they sent me to this old karate guy, kung fu guy. His name was Lou DiBricario, and Lou's still around. And I tell him all the time when I see him, I said, Lou, if it wasn't for you, I'd be a doctor. You know what I mean? Because he got me on this path to MMA, and I've never come off of it. And obviously, I wouldn't have been a doctor, but I like to tease him and tell him it's his fault that I'm in MMA. And he's a real good dude.
No, that's hilarious. That's definitely some good stuff, man. And we're definitely glad you're a part of martial arts. It's definitely an awesome journey, man, doing this stuff. And Joe, it's been fantastic talking to you. I really am glad I got to have you on the show. And
I appreciate it.
What's your final message out there for the fans watching this video?
So check us out. Like I said, all of our social media is everything is the same. It's all at combatfc.tv, combatfc.tv. So our website is combatfc.tv, our Instagram, our Facebook, our YouTube, all of those things are all the same, combatfc.tv. You can get tickets if you want to come out to the event live. I tell people all the time, if you've never seen a fight live, you've never seen a fight. I mean, it's completely different live, and it's so much fun. The event is Friday, September 13th. It's at the Shriners Auditorium. It starts at 6:30, and it'll probably go to about 11:15. So we are live on Swerve TV, which, like I said, is on Roku, Amazon, Fubo, TiVo, Sling, all the free stations, Apple, all those free stations at 8 o'clock. You can tune in. Tremendous station. I love those guys. They do such a good job. And then the replay will be on UFC Fight Pass. So you can watch it on UFC Fight Pass. We usually go live, but they had a couple other things that night. So we do two streams. We do the stream on Swerve, and then we do the stream on Fight Pass, but they have a couple other products that night that already had the date, so we did not do that. But you'll still be able to watch it on demand on Fight Pass afterwards.
Nice. No, that definitely sounds incredible. And I'm looking forward to Combat FC. Like I said, after this interview, I'm going to try to reach out to Kyle a little bit more, and I'll give you a little bit more of my information as well, too, so we can kind of stay in touch. And again, thank you so much for taking the time and talking to me. You definitely have a lot of fantastic stories. And like I said, I really enjoyed listening to them all. I could have been listening to them a lot longer. I really appreciated hearing them all. And
I appreciate it.
yeah, no
Okay.
worries.
Thanks, Kev.
All right, we'll be in touch. Take care. Good stuff.
Bye-bye.